Oh, nothing feels as good as being home in my own workshop. So, what have I been doing for the last year? Yeah, I've been really busy. Doing what, you ask? Making this. But that's going to be another video for another day. For now, what we're going to be doing is something completely different. Back to our usual schedule. So, here I was, just watching my regular YouTube, when one of my favorite YouTube channels, Shesez, the creator of Boundary Break, shows up with one of these things.
Shows itself as the production itself.
This is an animation cell from The Simpsons, which is really cool. But at the 6-minute and 30-second mark, right about there, he says this.
Hey, if you're an Etsy guy or whatever and you can make me a shadow box frame so I can get this thing layered, that would be super freaking cool. Reach out to me at my email address. I'll put it in the video description if you think you can handle something like that. I'll pay you. I just don't want a basic frame. I'd love to put that in something that shows off the layers of Homer, Marge, and Patty and Selma. But anyway.
And lo and behold, I gave him a shout, and he replied back. So, we're going to be building a picture frame for specifically that animation cell, which is 4 layers, several different sizes. So, to build this project, considering it's going to be essentially a picture frame, got some picture hanger wire, coating it black, and we're going to get a big old chunk of wood. Now, if you all remember how much I love using this tool here for cutting slots, we're not going to actually use the milling machine today for this one. First of all, it's because we're going to be using essentially over 4 feet of cutting. Now, trying to get straight line with one of these windows, you got to have some precision tooling to make sure that chuck is going to be perfectly straight. However, I don't have that, unfortunately. I'm not exactly the most rich kind of engineer. However, the poor engineers are the ones that actually make all the coolest stuff. But I've been without this tool for far too long. This is a radial arm saw. What can this thing do? Well, I can flip that to toggle to cut on an angle that way. I can pull this one to cut it this way. I can even bring it over there, locking that in place. Change the angle of that. Isn't that cool? So this is why we're going to be using this tool for today. Because I need all these different angles, plus the fact that we're running probably a little bit more than 4 feet of wood at a time in order to get the slots that I want for this thing. And, yep. Now that I've given you guys the tutorial of what this thing does, let's get at it. So, we've got a picture frame that's going to be 10¼ inches tall, plus 1 plus 1.5 for 3 inches on top of that gives us 13¼ inches. Let's just round it up to 14. Times 2 gives us 28 inches, which makes it much easier for cutting. Now, the reason why we're not cutting straight down is because we're going to be doing a bunch of tiny little fine-tuning cuts in order to make sure everything fits. So that's the height. The width is going to be about 12.5 inches. So we're going down to 40 plus 3 more inches will give us 43. But I'm just going to round it up to 44 just because it'll make it a lot easier to try to figure out the cutting for that. So, times 2 on the 16 gives us a grand total of 5 feet being cut. So, that means I don't have to rip the whole thing. I can cut this down to 2.5 feet and then work with smaller pieces. It'll be a lot easier to handle. And as always protect your eyes, always protect your ears, especially with loud equipment like this. Any kind of saw like that, any kind of hammering, Need to plug this thing in. Super easy. So, we're going to cut it 1/8 of an inch deep into this thing. The reason why we're using 1.5 inch instead of just 1 inch or 1/2 inch is because we've got the background of that photo, which is 14 by 11 compared to a 12.5 by 10.5. So that thickness is what's causing the difference here, because we've got about 1.5 inches of difference between the two. So that means one half's going to have 0.75. The other half's going to have 0.75 on the top, and the bottom is about 1/4 of an inch difference. So what we are going to do is we are going to cut these to the shortest lengths we want. Now, I've marked down on the bottom here all the different spots I want to cut them at. So we've got right here where we're going to chop this edge off so we have a nice straight corner. And then we're going to start the first picture. Actually, hold on. So we're going to have the background on here. The first layer on top of the background, which would be Patty and Selma, Marge, and Homer. And then we're going to cut the rest off, figure it out later on. Actually, you know what? This, trying to figure this out is kind of annoying. I'm going to start from, we're going to try to see if we can get that more towards the center. Okay, so we got 3/4 of an inch on the back there, because that's the back support material. I've got the background layer right there. I've got 1 inch between that to the Selma layer, 1 more inch to that, to the Marge layer, 1 inch to that over Homer's layer, and then another 1/2 inch for that border over there. So that seems pretty good. So that means that we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 and 1/4. Okay, let's go. All right, so one thing I'm actually going to do is that blade is about 1/8 of an inch thick. And what I'm going to go and put in order is 1/8 inch thick plastic so we can sandwich the different layers so that it's not going to go all flippy floppy. And that way, that means I have to cut this one on each side of each groove. So that's what I'm setting up right now to get cut right now on the right side, and then I'll cut the left side later on. And I'm going to actually cut both the stalks first before I change the position of that. That way it'll just make it much easier. Let's also call this my face so that I know exactly which way I'm putting this in. Oh, and if you're ever going to push stuff through a saw like this, never push with your hand. If your hand gets caught in there, bye-bye fingers. So that's why you got to use a push rod or something. Oh yeah, there's one more thing I wanted to do. Alright, so I've actually set up a guide bar so that it doesn't wobble side to side. This is just me being very picky about the tolerance of stuff. I may be a little bit over engineering this, and this bar costed me $20 and I'm not charging the client, but you know what? This is a tool. Tools stay with me. I'm keeping it. If my dad ever cuts this bar in half, he owes me $25. Not bad, not bad. That is 1/4 of an inch, which is 2/8. Beauty. Now, this little strip in here, I'm not too concerned about. That's what I got this thing for. Wood chisel. Why do they always have to come in these stupid freaking hard to open packages? Grr. Yes, I know. Some of you may be screaming that I ripped it the wrong way. Yes, I just realized that myself right now. So I'm going to start feeding it from this side now, because the direction of the rotation goes this way. You should be cutting against the grain instead of trying to back knife it. Because when you cut this way, on a blade that turns this way, you're essentially trying to do this. Chop, 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 which is not what you're supposed to do. You're going to go scoop, 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 scoop. So, yes, for those of you who are screaming your head off earlier, my apologies. I kind of forgot which way this thing spins. Guard is too tight. I can't push it through. Oh, look at the new puppy. Go, go. Good girl. Good girl. Good girl. Oh. And 8 passes later, I have this. This looks pretty good. Now, just need to take my chisel and just start whittling away all these inside lines away. Yeah. Okay, so usually when you're doing a stripping rip with one of these things, you gotta turn this machine on and then you can lower it down. It's basically because this needs somewhere to go, and where that goes is into the table. But I'm noticing that somebody already had that little fun, so I guess I don't have to turn this thing on in order to lower it down. That's how it's done. Okay, that might be a little bit of a problem. I think I'm gonna have to just throw that onto the sander. But, I mean, these are 1/2 inch. So, I could potentially put this on the back half and then cut this to the 1/2 inch that I need. Hopefully, less interruption. Because these will be for cross bracing across the back. Yeah, I think that might work. Initially, I had another piece for doing that specific piece, so guess I don't need it. That's a lot of dust. There's a reason why I use a leather jacket when I'm doing my woodworking. Because I didn't want to have so much fibers in my fabric jackets. Well, that's another quick tip for anyone who's interested in doing garage work. Get yourself a good jacket that doesn't absorb dust. I honestly can't express to you how convenient that is. So, if you're ever planning to measure out something with a cut in it so that you can just reuse one whole piece without changing it out, what you do is you find the measurement you want. So I want 10 1/4 inch. Oh no, that's 10 1/4 inch right there. And then you add the width of your blade to that. Because if I went 10 1/4 inch times 2 equals 20 1/2. then what'll happen is that I'll actually have it about a 1/16 of an inch short on both of them, because that blade is an 1/8 of an inch thick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, all right, the last cut was 20 1/4 plus an 1/8. So it's going to be right there, and the blade's going to be right there. That's just one of those things that you kind of pick up on after working on stuff for so long, finding out that you've been measuring things wrong. That's never a good thing. But since you're watching my video on how to make stuff, hopefully that gives you a little bit of a heads up. Now that I got my blanks all ready to go, I am going to have a border of I'm going to have this as a 45-degree angle right here. So this is going to be 1.5 inches out this way. So I'm just going to mark that up here. It's going to be 10 inches and 1/4 out this way. So plus the 1.5 inch, which gives me right there. And then it's basically just rinse and repeat for everything else. So, after I get everything all assembled, glued together, that's when we start doing some cleanup work. This is actually a heavy. I'm glad I got the bigger wire hangers. So you remember why I had so much extra room? It's because of that. That little buffer there allows me to not have to be super accurate until I needed to, which is nice. So, speaking of which, going to notice here that we have one frame that's going to be 10.5, which is what everything else is going to be size 2, and one frame that's going to be 12.5 inches. So they're going to sink in by an 1/8 of an inch there and an 1/8 of an inch there. But the background, as Shesez says, is 11 by 14, which is a completely different measurement, which means I'm going to have to cut down that last background slot a lot deeper, which is why we went for the 1.5 inch, because that's going to go down another somewhere between 1/4 and 3/4 of an inch. As you can clearly see here, the size differences. Now, the funny thing is that that 1/4 inch there and that 1/4 inch there and that 3/4 inch there are not going to be on the pieces that the measurements are against. They are differences on the edges. So that means I have this 1/4 inch here is going to be cut into 14, and the 3/4 inch is going to be cut on the 10-inch ones, which is going to be not too big of a deal. It's just a matter of I need to set the gauge back up, the fence back up. I also have to measure that depth again, which is not going to be a problem. We'll be fine. Starting to look really good. I took some sandpaper and I started sanding off the corners there just to make it easier for the sandwich layers to be able to slot in. But it's still kind of rough. Like right there. This section surface right there, it's kind of rough. And it's really rough down here. I can't stain this right now. So what I'm going to have to do is bring this over to the sanding machine to sand the surfaces before I start painting it. And I'm going to also do that before I put the thing together because it'll be easier to hold it this way. So far it's looking pretty good. I like it. Everything's so far nice and smooth, and that seems to be done upside down. Oh well, not to worry. I actually plan to have this piece to have wider slots anyway, so that when you go to close this together, it's not trying to line it up, because the more important parts is the top, the bottom have it lined up so that it mates into the other side here. But for this side, we'll just cut an extra slot and then sand that off. Smell that? Smells like work being done. Okay. I as much as I joke around about being messy, it is important to make sure that you pack away all your stuff when you're finished using them. But just to let you know, having a nice shelf to sort all your colors by colors is quite nice. So I found this in my room. I must have had another purpose for this, but you know what? For this project, I think it's very applicable to use. I spend a little bit of time to make sure things are properly filled in. Especially I'm going to be painting it. Once I paint it, it's going to be difficult to try to do any kind of touch-ups afterwards. Although, why is that so thick? Sanding. Wait 15 minutes for light repairs and 2 hours for deep repairs before sanding. Use medium sandpaper and avoid high-speed sanding. Well, 15 minutes. That means time to go make some tea. So, with terms of screwing this thing back together, I'm going to try to prevent that wood from splitting apart. This normally happens if you've got really long screws or really big screws. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a 1/8 inch drill bit to pre-drill the holes on this side. And then I'm going to fill it full of wood fill, and then I'm going to paint it. And now that I get that hole started on there, then I can... And since I don't want to have any evidence of this hole here when I put the screw in, get a bigger drill bit so I can put a countersink in there. But I don't want to drill it all the way through. I just want it deep enough to put the screw head inside, and then I can just plug it up. There. Now that that's being held together like that, it should make my life a lot easier to do it. Now I just need to do that one, and then I can do the other two. Okay, now that I've got the frame all screwed together, it's nice and straight. I'm happy with what this is. The nice thing about having the screws in there is that I can back them out, and then I can get this white glue in there to glue the frame together, so it's super nice and strong. Still going to need to put the little brace here, because where else am I going to put the hanger? Okay, so some of you might be wondering, isn't this a job for carpenter's glue? Why are you using white glue? Well, the thing is that carpenter's glue essentially is a more industrious version of white glue. The whole point is that the glue seeps into the material of the wood, and then what it will do is it will essentially dry out, form its plastic as it impregnates the wood. So I'm just going to spread that out nicely across there. It's important to make sure that you just have enough glue, because if you don't, gaps don't get filled. You need to fill that gap. Either way, while I'm waiting, might as well go back to filling up those holes like I kind of wanted to. See? Hardly noticed that they were there. Now that everything's all dried and filled up and ready to go, nice and solid, and as an extra, I put some magnets in there. Some steel screws to let the magnets attach. Now to clean up this outside edge here on the sander. Now that it's all been sanded, nice and smooth, time to start coating this thing. That's the French. Alright, first thing you need to do, make sure you get some nice clean gloves on, because this stuff will go into your skin. Next is to get yourself a piece of fabric. Gently get this guy open. Last thing I want is to be accused of coloring my skin inappropriately. Then it's my cloth. Get a good amount there. Simply, lightly, and thoroughly apply. Nice and simple. It's okay if you get too much stain on a wooden product because the stain soaks into the wood. And the best results is to have fully saturating the wood. And there we have it, a black wooden frame for Shesez and his beautiful piece of cinema art. However, I kind of want to... It's not exactly as dark as I really want it to be. You know what? I do have plenty. There we go. That looks a lot better. Nice flat black spray on top of a polyurethane undercoat. Gonna do a clear coat after that dries off. And also the underside because I only finished up the first coat and it's kind of shouldn't flip this on top of wet paint. But yeah. Let's see when I can get those sheets of plastic in for filling in the middle here. But otherwise, I think the frame is pretty much good to go. Finally got them in. 10.5 plus 10.5 is 21. 21 at 31.5, 42, 40. That worked really well. Nice and clean. Very nice. Alright, test fitting. Let's see if this works. So, 14 by 11 goes on the back, and it's a little tight there. Check to see the lengths of that. That's little variations on that, but that's not too big of a problem. I can certainly cut them down. But let's just take the smallest ones because that's what I'm going to be cutting down to. See how well those fit. Fits the thickness of the groove quite nicely. Slots down and just a little bit of touch up. A little bit of repainting is not going to be too big of a problem, is it? I mean, it's just spray can paint at this point, right?
7 hours later.
And, well, I think it came out pretty good. Took some time to open up these channels properly, as well as to fit each one of these channels inside here. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 slides to go in there. Of course, I do need to do a little bit of touch-up painting. There we go. That looks really nice. And side comes off. Goes back on perfectly nicely. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making this thing. And we'll see how this thing gets set up. I'm not going to remove the plastic because I want this thing to be fully protected for it to go over to Shesez's apartment. And I'll let him unwrap that for himself. So that first thing that comes up when it's nice and clean is going to be right when it's being used.